For more on the new tariff cuts, let's go ahead and bring in John Gong. He's professor of economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome, Professor Gong. I want to start with the baby formula there. Oftentimes we hear about tariffs. It's this abstract concept for economists and trade representatives and politicians. But here in that report, we're hearing of a concrete effect on people. How significant it is for a sector like the baby product sector?
Well, the baby formula product is huge in China because, you know, there's a series of baby formula scandals in China a couple of years ago. So I think now in China there's a very large percentage of the consumers market that are actually very devoted consumers of imports, especially from Mead and Johnson products from American companies. So I think it's a very large market, and the tariff on these products really hit people's pockets. So I think it's a very good sign that these tariffs will be scaled back, that consumers stand to be winners in this case.
But a lot of times tariffs are meant to get the domestic makers to step up their game. Are we seeing Chinese baby formula makers doing that?
I'm a little bit skeptical because this is I think, at least from people I know that are relatively well off, they tend to use baby formula products from imported products. As a matter of fact, several years ago, there's an incident where Chinese consumers would just go to Hong Kong and scoop up these products, and it caused a sort of a concern in the Hong Kong market where people in Hong Kong complaining about this. So I think the demand for imported baby formulas in China is huge. It's a very large market.
So this round of cuts covers worldwide exporters. Who's likely to benefit the most from it?
Aside from the baby formula industry, I would say the American auto companies. In China, we imported a lot of high-end cars, especially SUVs, from Detroit. These tariffs are very large, actually, something like more than 25% ever since the trade war started. So I think it really cuts into the demand for these vehicles. The automobile market in China wasn't doing very well last year, and now with these tariffs gone, I think there will be coming back demand for these great American SUVs and even pickup trucks, actually. Pickup truck in China is picking up steam these days. You won't believe this.
Frozen pork is also on the list.
Oh, yeah, products, yeah.
This time, and that's timely given the Chinese consumers' demand for pork in the wake of African swine fever and what it's done to the pork inventory there. Do you think this move will alleviate some of the concerns in China over pricing?
Well, absolutely. I think one of the biggest component in the Phase 1 agreement is about China's commitment to purchase something like $50 billion worth of American agricultural products. That includes soybeans, that includes pork and beef, and as you mentioned, the pork prices in China really went up substantially. I was in the United States for the last couple of days. I look around the grocery stores, and the price for pork in the U.S., for example, is now comparable to that in China. It's actually even cheaper. Can you believe that? I mean, the average income here is much higher than in China. The GDP per capita is 3 times more in China, but now we're seeing price comparable on pork.
You've got to be very careful in comparative global shopping. But in terms of pork, is the average Chinese going to feel the impact of the price thanks to the tariff reduction?
I hope so. I definitely hope so. I think the pork price is slated to come back significantly. Right now it's like 40, 50 even yuan per kilo. That means that's about $7 per kilo. I mean, it's very expensive now. People are switching to other protein sources. As a matter of fact, I've even found that pork prices are comparable to shrimp prices, seafood prices in China. And you can imagine how much more expensive they come up in recent years.
Given the timing of all this, is there a connection between these cuts and the U.S.-China trade talks?
You mean on the pork?
Yeah, the tariff reductions that we're just seeing now on.
Yeah, well, I think eventually, these tariffs will be reflected, reductions will be reflected in the pricing in the consumer markets. I mean, that's for sure. I think, the market operates in a way that, typically producers and importers will just pass on added cost of tariffs onto the consumers, and with the cost tariffs gone, definitely they're going to be reflected in the pricing to the consumer markets.
Peter Navarro, Trump's trade advisor, said that the Phase 1 trade deal will have more detailed provisions on IP protection and market access. How do you understand it?
Yeah, well, definitely. IP protection is getting strengthened, in my opinion, in China, not just because of this trade war, because corporate China's positioning on IPR has already shifted. I mean, more from a licensee position to a licensor position. Chinese companies also becoming licensors of technologies, right? So, there's a demand for stricter protection of these rights in China. And also, I think the forced technology transfer, the so-called forced technology transfer issue, is already being addressed. I think it also should be in the Phase 1 agreement as well. And of course, there's the issue about financial market in China. There are concrete actions coming in China right now to open more in the financial markets. And also there's some, reportedly there's some talk about currency exchange ratio also being covered in the Phase 1 deal.
All right, Professor John Gong, thank you for your insight. Thank you for joining us.